I'm back. Well, here we go again. This time with the original Gradius, also known as Nemesis in the US and the UK. I'll take any and every excuse I can to speak on this masterpiece's behalf. Let's cut the chatter and get straight to the part where we reset, hit record, just like this. UK record Nemesis UK.inp. There we go. And we are all set to go. I'm going to be enabling auto fire for this one beforehand, so I do not end up killing my hands ahead of time. This is the international version of Gradius, like I established earlier, but it has a very interesting rebalancing compared to the Japanese version of this game. The Japanese version of this game is easier in the sense that the bullets are slightly slower. However, a lot of the checkpoints are a lot harder to recover from in general. Oh, I forgot the timer again. Why don't I go ahead and get that timer started up? I learn from my mistakes, which is a crucial skill for playing arcade games effectively well. Anyway, this is the game, the legend itself, and I have nothing but the greatest things to say about it. A lot of shoot-em-ups up until this point were following the Xevious and Scramble formula, where it was monkey see enemy, monkey shoot enemy. But this game took the strategic aspect of shoot-em-ups to, what is Scooter Shooter? Somebody forgot to change Scooter Shooter on the overlay. Well, my run's invalidated now since I hit the pause button. I ought to throw it in the garbage and start all over again. But in all seriousness, though, Gradius is a game that sold 1 million copies in Japan for a really damn good reason. You actually need to actively switch your weapons when you reach situations that call for them, and we never really saw that level of game design before, on top of the excellent graphics for 1985 standards. This game's shading and the artistic merit of this game went so far beyond what an average game looked like back then. Compare this to an average Sega game from 1984 or 1985, and it looks insanely ahead of the times. Well, you know what? We're not going to count Hang On and whatnot because we got to pay massive amounts of respect to super scalar games. Hang On and Fantasy Zone, that's a bad comparison. I should say the average Nintendo game or the average arcade game from back then. And this first scene visualizes everything that's good about Gradius right from the outset. You gotta memorize everything that's thrown at you. There's a good mix of memorization and randomization, which made Scooter Shooter great beforehand. But now you have to deal with the grief of losing your power-ups when you die. I will actually defend the checkpoint system in this game since, A, it was the year 1985, and people are still figuring out game design in general, and B, every single checkpoint in this game, including in the loops, was designed to be recoverable if you put enough effort into learning all of them. Hopefully, we're not going to have to checkpoint recover anywhere in this run. Yeah, 1985 was one of the greatest years for arcade games, period. A lot of the top arcade developers back then were creating cabinets like Hang On and pushing the medium forward in very meaningful ways. Super Mario Brothers created the Nintendo control scheme as we know it today, and the NES port of this game is insanely popular, like I mentioned earlier. The NES version and the computer versions on MSX are not a good comparison to this, though. The arcade versions of these games are obviously way harder because of their aforementioned Konami rank. All the bullets are faster in this version of Gradius, but take note of this scene right here, for instance, which I was moving on that one. That's okay. That's okay. That is okay to have a dumb mistake at the beginning of the game. usually go all power-ups when I play this game. I really think that I'm better off with all power-ups instead of needing to suicide later on in the game. You can suicide in order to get the bullet speed low again, but I don't recommend that for a variety of reasons. Played the heck out of Salamander and Life Force. That's one of the best games in the entire series, dude. Well, now you get to know the origin of it all. My strategy for recovery on this part in Loop 2 is not to do that for starters. I'm about to die really embarrassingly. Hey, woohoo! I think I ought to be a bit more cautious about myself from this point forward. Let's not get greedy for those power-ups this time around and only go for them when I have a clear opportunity. Take the laser here and cut my way through all this nonsense. That's the most embarrassing performance that I ever put up on any arcade game, period. I'm just going to flush that run down the toilet where it belongs, and I'm going to start again since we have plenty of time remaining. That's okay, though. That means we're not going to be showing off Loop 2. I will kill it off after one loop of this then. Okay, let's get a new recording of this started up so we can play it again. Yeah, I invalidated my run earlier and nothing happened. All right, here we go again. This time we're going to have more success. Reset the timer, put that coin in, and here we go again. But that means I do have to cut it off after one loop. That wasn't supposed to be a hard recovery whatsoever, but sometimes these things happen, like you mentioned in chat. That was just a button check. I was just making sure my keyboard was perfectly functional. Ocean Attack was also 1985. Thank you for the reminder on that one. Thank you for the reminder. Interesting tech hardware and info about this game, by the way. Originally, this game ran on very unusual hardware called bubble system hardware. And bubble memory needed to be heated up by the room temperature and its own hardware in order to display everything correctly. But it ended up having a massive failure rate in Japanese arcades because overexposure to electronic interference would cause the darn thing to corrupt itself for quite a long time. So eventually, they converted it over to a standard ROM, and that's what they shipped overseas as well. We ended up getting a standard ROM version of this running on Nemesis hardware, and they reused that same hardware for all this game's sequels. But it just goes to show you, along with the Deco cassette system, that industrial arcade game design is another beast to talk about and another aspect of arcade gaming that I miss in and of itself. I actually started my career on shoot 'em ups all the way back in 2001 with Gunbird 2, by the way. And then Gradius was one of the games that I had on my dad's Nintendo when he picked that up as a hand-me-down all those years later. I had Gradius, I had... what else did I have on Sega Genesis? I forget the name of the game, but I think I had Thunder Force 3 on Genesis back then. And that's largely what got me into the world of shoot 'em ups. I saw an insane video on Toho 8 Imperishable Night. I saw an awesome replay on that. And that's what convinced me to dedicate a lot of my time to the genre. On top of all the strategic aspects that make Gradius great, it's just the pure simplicity of shoot or be shot that tests the player's mettle and their skills to the finest. There's not a more pure gaming experience than this is. And now I have my force field on me to be cautious after what happened the last time around. The force field in this game could also be used as a battering ram as well. The force field actually does contact damage in this game, and the best use for it, of course, is blocking bullets. So I'm going to be parking myself on the left side of the screen quite frequently from this point forward. And that's actually part of the strategy once they introduce the suicide bullets in the second loop. Da 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 da. This is the first change that they made in the international version of this game, by the way. There's more of those guys, and there's a higher risk of getting clipped by a bullet above or below you. So my strategy is to have a force field going into that, and just crash into them so I absorb whatever suicide bullet they might vomit out. This section is completely random, by the way. You can either have lots of speed ups, or you can just park yourself in a nice little corner if you got a spare shield on deck. Unless we have our next rematch against Big Core. This game is a little low on the variety in the boss department, but considering everything else this game did right in 1985, I'm gonna cut the 1985 game a little slack here. Now I replenish my shield. This is the first time where the laser is going to come in handy. It's the first introduction of the Easter Island Moai heads, which the developers said they added the wackiest thing that they could think of to add a sense of mystery to this game. There was a lot of things that inspired space shooters in the 1980s. Obviously had Star Wars and Star Trek being the prime examples, but this game took it a step further by taking weird structures we have in the real world and making them more of a prominent force. Here they are shooting out onion rings that'll make my heart explode if I eat just one of them. We brought a very strict diet around here, you see? We had to make sure our ship was nice and slim for this mission. But this is the first example of where you'd want a specific weapon, because the double cuts your firing rate in half. You can only have one shot at a screen instead of two. So it's not an appropriate weapon for this situation. And the boss at the end. The laser also goes right through enemy projectiles as well. These armored bullets you can't shoot through if you have a regular weapon, so having the piercing properties of laser makes this trivial. We can just go ahead and do this. And it was a Star Wars arcade game, and it was really rad back then. Like, this thing might straight up be the Millennium Falcon now that I think about it. Now, Commando also set the example for run-and-gun games, along with this setting the example for shoot-em-ups. What else did I have to mention on this game? I remember the feeling of satisfaction I got when I finished this game that had no continues on it whatsoever. I needed to use the Konami code in order to beat Nintendo Gradius back then, but it was the exhilaration of finding out new strategies and things like that to overcome my greatest demons that defines what gaming is for me. And I'm sure the same goes for a lot of you as well. Hooray for destroying the core. I have to buckle down and focus on stage 4, by the way. Yeah, the difference between the US and the European version is that this ranks up faster. I'm actually on max rank right now. This is as fast as the bullet speed gets in this. The US version, yeah, not Nintendo Gradius though. I still finished the Nintendo version with no continues back when I was like 11 or 10 years old. And I felt like the king of the entire world when I managed to pull that off for the first time. It's little wonder why shoot-em-ups are my primary arcade game genre. But I did do a fair bit of Street Fighter, like everyone else did way back when. I still play Street Fighter 2 on occasion, even though I wasn't really invested into the fighting game scene as much as I was in this game. Imagine my surprise when I found out how much harder the arcade version was. We got past the difficult checkpoint here. Oh, the rarest cabinet I ever saw in my life has to be the Sega Star Wars arcade game. They imported one of those things from Japan at Fun Zone in Hicksville, Long Island. It doesn't exist anymore, but they used to have a lot of imported games from Japan at that point. They had the latest versions of Beatmania, so they had Beatmania the Final, and they had an In the Groove 2 cabinet in there as well. That has to be the rarest arcade unit I've seen in my life by far. Oh, I've heard that only very few of those units were produced and only released in Japan due to licensing issues. And sure enough, the Model 1 Star Wars arcade game ended up being an excellent interpretation of Star Wars. In fact, the ending of this game is a direct nod to Star Wars. Here we're starting to see that Konami ran a little low on ideas for this part of the game since they copy the same brain enemy over and over and over again. But people have deadlines to meet, and with them trying to figure out how this game should play in the first place, like I said, I can imagine that stage design was probably the last thing they worked on this game, with 2 of them being partial repeats. This was still considerably more advanced than just the same freaking level over and over and over again. Go all the way back to 1984 with Tower of Jiraga. You know, one of the first non-racing games that you can actually win. Tower of Jiraga did not change its level themes whatsoever. Well, this does. And we're gonna see the last 2 unique level themes after we're done with this. This is a really good spot to have the shield in, by the way. And the next level will also play a factor into what influenced R-Type and other popular Japanese games at its time. I'll just take a moment to compose my thoughts as we are about to fight yet another big core. I'll have a lot to say when I get to this next level. So once you have the refined game design of Gradius down, and you've got more evolved gameplay, people naturally decided to focus on hardware power from that point forward. And they already had a winning formula at Gradius, so you had companies like Irem come up that were outdoing each other in what I like to call the sprite war sizes. And you bet Konami was involved in that as well when they made Gradius 3 and Gradius 2. R-Type didn't necessarily do anything new from a gameplay perspective. However, atmospherically and artistically, it was out of control. And you have this game, you're truly to thank for it. Now we're starting to get into the really weird alien planets that you don't even see in Star Wars and whatnot. You're going inside of the human body itself, and these ideas came at a whim, which were strange and unusual to the game developers. This is what influenced Salamander to be as bioorganic as it was. This is what kickstarted Irem's interest in making the enemies in R-Type as grotesque as it was. Good ideas in a good video game result in the people that grew up with them being inspired to make an even better version of that. Hence why we ended up getting the R-Type battleship, as we like to call it. Konami themselves would inevitably end up goofing the R-Type battleship in the Parodius series. Here's a spot where you can get a crap ton of points with little to no effort. You can park yourself underneath the big cell that's holding this mass together. Maybe we were actually going through a giant living organism all this time. But yeah, that inspired excellent stage design in later shoot-em-ups. Now we're gonna be flying into the Bacterion's base and destroying the big core. I love this game. I adore it very much so, and now I very much cannot talk on this part whatsoever. You can use the laser or you could use the double here. It doesn't matter, but you die here and you're screwed. I have never once been able to successfully recover from the second checkpoint in this stage. I have to shut up and I have to put up. The important thing that you can do here is park your options at the spawn points where the enemies come and prevent yourself from being overwhelmed that way. You want to be partially aggressive with your shield here. Let too many enemies on the screen at once and it gets ugly really fast. But yes, this is very much Han Solo flying into the exhaust port of the Death Star. It was cool back then when they did it in the movies, and it was cool in a video game as well. And no amount of time can ever take that away from this game. This moment is always going to remain cool no matter what year you're playing it in. And that's a testament to Gradius's legacy. One last obstacle before the ending. They throw the shower stall at you. Yes, I played Grodius. I can't unsee this thing as a big old shower stall trying to soak you all down. This is supposed to be a tractor beam. It causes a lot of lag, as you might expect. Once you overcome this, though, then you have to await the horrors of the final boss. The game designers threw the hardest game across the wall as they could, and naturally they have to finish off with a big, strong alien mastermind. Beware! You know, the strongest enemy in video game history. Did I actually die on the... I actually died on the strongest boss in video game history. It's no problem. This is actually an easy recovery, though. It's just they throw a couple of enemies at you and then the gate again. Thank goodness they have a checkpoint that's before then. I can't believe I actually died there. I should have been micro-tapping when I was holding up on the button, but there you go. That's one misrun of Gradius 1. And I have to stop it right here because I would go over time otherwise. I ran for 20 minutes exactly, so that's one loop of Gradius, and that's that. Boy, howdy, what a night it's been so far. I can't get over that death. I'm gonna pass things over to Super Viper now, who's gonna play Gradius 3. See, Gradius 1 is possible to recover from at all times, but Gradius 3, on the other hand, was designed for people that were gods at Gradius. It is such a cruel game. I'm wishing him all the best. Good night, everyone.